Can New Mexico State make it to just their 5th bowl game in school history? Find out here on the Gridiron Expert.
Yeah.
In 2017, New Mexico State made their first bowl game since 1960 and won their first bowl game since 1960. But in 2018, they lost their quarterback, their leading rusher, their leading wide receiver, and their leading tackler. A rebuilding year was in store, and that's exactly what happened to the Aggies as they went from 7-6 in 2017 to 3-9 in 2018, including an 0-4 start to the season. But Doug Martin and his squad returned quite a bit of experience in 2019. Whether or not it will be good enough to get to a bowl game, just their 5th ever in program history, that remains to be seen. But they do return 8 offensive starters, including their quarterback, Josh Adkins, who last year showed a lot of promise as a true freshman quarterback, throwing for just 2,500 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 19 interceptions. But I expect him to take a major step forward as a sophomore in his second year as the starter. They also return Jason Huntley and Christian Gibson, who both rushed for over 500 yards last year, and Huntley was the number 2 wide receiver for the Aggies last season, so proved himself as a reliable pass catcher for New Mexico State. Defensively, they return 6 starters from a unit that allowed 41.3 points per game. That was their worst stat, their worst mark since 2015 when they allowed 45 points per game. But Javon Ferguson returns with 132 tackles last year, the leading tackler for the Aggies. He will lead this linebacking core and will absolutely lead this entire defense. So New Mexico State, rough schedule ahead, but have the experience there to maybe get to their 5th bowl game in program history. But as you can see, we already have a third of their schedule marked down, and we don't always like to pencil in games, but it's a tough schedule when you're facing 2 SEC opponents and a Washington State team that won 11 games last year. It should be noted that New Mexico State is 0-13 versus Power 5 opponents since 2011, and they have never defeated an SEC opponent. So we have them falling to Washington State and Mike Leach's potent air raid passing attack. Of course, a no-brainer loss to Alabama. Tua Tagovailoa once again going to shred this Aggies defense. Ole Miss, a team that I think will struggle in 2019, but has the experience defensively and should be building things up offensively by November 9th to get the win over New Mexico State and then an easy win over their FCS opponent. So right now, right off the gate, we have New Mexico State sitting at 1-3. We'll dive into the rest of the schedule, all games that are not guaranteed wins or losses for the Aggies. And then we'll kick things off with San Diego State, a team out of the Mountain West that is the favorite to go to the Mountain West Championship game, has a very experienced team led by Ryan Agnew at quarterback and Juwan Washington at running back. And as we all know, San Diego State over the past few years has had some very dominant running backs. You have Rashad Penny, Donnell Pumphrey, and now Washington, who rushed for 999 yards, just one away from a 1,000-yard season in 2018. I expect him to have a big day against this New Mexico State defense that will be experienced, will be battle-tested by week 3, having faced 2 solid Power 5 opponents. But even though they get to host this game, San Diego State's just going to have too much offensively, and they will fall, starting off the season 0-3. And keep in mind, last year they started off the season 0-4. They then get New Mexico on September 21st, and I love rivalry games, and I love rivalry games like this that have a lot of history. Last year, New Mexico State lost to the Lobos 42-25. But in 2019, this is the 110th meeting between New Mexico and New Mexico State. They have met every single year since 1946 and have split the past 10 meetings, 5 in favor of the Lobos, 5 in favor of the Aggies. So a phenomenal rivalry there, plenty of history, 110 meetings now in 2019, and the title of the champion of the 110th meeting will go to the New Mexico State Aggies. I had them going on the road and beating their rivals. I know they lost last year to the Lobos by 17 points at home, but really, when you're in state, I don't really see much of a huge home field advantage there. New Mexico State's going to travel well. You've got New Mexico fans all over the place. It's going to be just fine. New Mexico, though, only returns 2 starters defensively from a unit that allowed over 36 points per game last year. This has the chance to be a shootout because both teams return experienced offenses, 8 starters each, and have much improved quarterback play. If their defenses don't improve, then it is going to be a shootout. But New Mexico State owns that defensive advantage, and they will go on the road and beat their rival in New Mexico. They are now 1-3 on the season before we get to the other games that we have marked down. They then host Fresno State and Liberty, so 2 back-to-back home games there. And we'll start with Fresno State, a team that New Mexico State hasn't met since 2011, back when Fresno State and the Aggies were both members of the WAC. It was hard to believe that we used to have a WAC conference. But Fresno State is doing a phenomenal job under Jeff Tedford, who had one of the best turnarounds a few years ago in all of college football, and last year won 12 games with the Bulldogs, including winning the Mountain West Championship. While they do lose Marcus McMarion at quarterback, and while they will have to have a bunch of shoes to fill, Fresno State will still be one of the best teams in the Mountain West. Too much defensively in this game to lose to the Aggies. Fresno State comes on the road, beats New Mexico State, and they take their 4th loss of the season. They are just 1-4. They then host Liberty on October 5th, and these two guys split the series last year. They faced off against each other twice last year, home-and-home series. And it was very interesting because New Mexico State won at home over Liberty by 8 points, but lost at Liberty by 7 points. So great games all the way around. Liberty across the board is going to be much more improved this season. They have Stephen Calvert at quarterback, the 3rd all-time leading passer in Liberty history. Hugh Freeze steps in as head coach, who has experience of coaching in the SEC at Ole Miss. But I like this New Mexico State team. It is very difficult to beat the same team twice in the same year. And I think they will split the series once again, but they will win at home over Liberty to get their 2nd win of the season. Liberty showed us a lot of signs of improvement last year, winning 6 games in their first full season in the FBS, and that might be the same thing that's going to happen to them this year. They're not to the point where they can win 8 or 9 games, but it's still going to be a tough out nonetheless. They then go on the road to face off against Central Michigan, a team that will now be led by Jim McElwain, the former Florida head coach. And he has a veteran quarterback in Quentin Dormady. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because he was the former quarterback at Tennessee. He is using his last year of eligibility to play for the Chippewas, who went just 1-11 last year. But with Dormady at quarterback, McElwain as head coach, they will drastically improve that record in the MAC. This game on the road, experience across the board for Central Michigan. I think New Mexico State falls in this game. They then get a bye week going on the road to face off against Georgia Southern, also out of the Sun Belt. And it's an interesting storyline because Shai Werts, the quarterback for the Eagles, just got caught with cocaine. And he quoted to say that the cocaine was bird poop. I'm buying it. I'm buying it. But nonetheless, he passed his drug test. He will be eligible to return to practice. Whether or not he will be eligible to return at the beginning of the season remains to be seen. But regardless, he should be back in time for this game on October 26th. And Georgia Southern won 10 games last year. Went from winning just 2 games in 2017 to winning 10 games in 2018. That option offense so difficult to stop. I don't think New Mexico State has what it takes to beat Georgia Southern this year, a team that could very well win 9 or 10 games once again, and they will fall to the Eagles, even though they're coming off a bye week. And I hate for New Mexico State that they have 1 game sandwiched in between 2 bye weeks. I hate that they have a bye week, a game, and then another bye week. You need some games in between there. You need to spread out your bye weeks. But unfortunately, that's not how the schedule worked out for them. They fall to Georgia Southern. They're coming off a bye. They fall to Ole Miss. They beat that FCS opponent there. And then they have their 2 final games remaining. And right now, they're sitting at 3 wins. So certainly outside of bowl contention, but a chance at a 5-win season, which is absolutely an improvement from that 3-9 season they had last year. They host UTEP, and you're going to get your improvement right here. I had them beating the Miners, a team that went 1-11 last year, and New Mexico State actually beat 27-20. Now, UTEP, kind of like Central Michigan, is going to improve from that 1-11 record that they had last year. They're going to be led by Kai Loxley, the son of Maryland head coach Mike Loxley, and I think he will make a major step forward in his 2nd year as starter with the Miners. But having to come on the road to New Mexico State, a team that's going to be kind of rested after an easy win there, I think they beat UTEP clinched their 4th win of the season. But as we mentioned earlier, fall to Liberty, we think they split that series once again in 2019 between the Flames and the Aggies. And so Doug Martin's New Mexico State Aggies will go just 4-8 in 2019. Obviously not the season the Aggie fans want. They have dealt with so much pain going from 1960 to 2017 without a bowl game, without a bowl appearance. But 4-8 and a 1-game improvement from last year. Looking at the schedule, maybe they're able to snag a win at home, a major upset against Fresno State or San Diego State, and then this Central Michigan game is absolutely winnable for the Aggies, absolutely. So they have the talent to go bowling for just a second time in the past 3 years, which would be a remarkable feat for Doug Martin and his squad. But right now, we don't see it. 4-8, probably the most realistic expectation for the Aggies in 2019. So guys, as always, thank you for watching us here on YouTube. Go check us out on Twitter and Instagram at Gridiron Expert, and check out our official website, thegridironexpert.com. Sign up for our newsletter and sign up for our expert picks. For just $30, you will receive every single one of our 2019 college football spread picks, including the postseason. And I can promise you that's a deal you do not want to pass up. So join our team. Sign up today only at thegridironexpert.com. And once again, guys, thank you for watching us here on YouTube. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe. And we will see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.